Welcome to the Delineation, an astrology show with Cam White.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Delineation. This is episode 5. It's been a while since I've done an episode. I was on a small little hiatus simply because of that gnarly Mercury retrograde. There was an eclipse on my midheaven ruler. Plus, Saturn's been opposite my Mercury, which is my 10th house ruler. Anyway, bunch of excuses to pretty much say I was a little bit cautious of me going on a microphone. In today's episode, we're going to talk about how astrologers deal, or at least astrologers deal with negative astrology. So, and some of the ways that I deal with it too, because I got asked this question. But I kind of wanted to open up with, even part of how I deal with some of the negative astrology is, for example, I had some negative astrology going on with me over this past month. So one of the ways that I kind of dealt with it was by not recording, which, might have been a little bit problematic, but because I know a lot of you guys are probably upset. But anyway, yeah, I want to talk about this whole episode. I really want to talk about how to deal with negative astrology, how astrologers deal with, negative astrology. We're in such a weird position as astrologers, as just even people who are into astrology. It's a weird position to be in where even though not every prediction you make is going to be the exact one, you can know that at least you're going to get something correct, something along those lines is going to come up, at which the planets kind of say, most of astrology is negative, so it can be, really scary. And so someone asked me this. I meant to have this note pulled up, but I don't have it pulled up. But anyway, before we actually begin on the rest of this episode, thank you to the patrons that make this podcast possible. We got a bunch of new $10 patrons, which, by the way, I got some exciting stuff coming up for you guys here in like a week or two. I don't want to say anything yet, but $10 patrons are going to get some more goodies as well. Anyway, if you guys want to support the podcast, subscribe to the Patreon. You got commercial-free horoscopes as well as early release on everything. So also thank the patrons in the comments below because without them, this wouldn't be possible. Anyway. I also got some more stuff coming too for the podcast, but I'll just go ahead and release it rather than say it. But anyway, I'm starting this. I wanted to do this episode because someone had asked me a question. Let's see if I can actually find the document. Let's see. Someone, I believe it was on Twitter. Their @name is @Bree with 3 I's DC @Bree DC. They said you should talk more about your personal placements and how astrology has been therapeutic for you, specifically on your next podcast. I have some pretty heavy, shitty placements, and I'm curious if others struggle with being aware of their challenging energies. Phenomenal question. Really, really good question. You know what I mean? Something I really want to emphasize with this podcast is, just talking more about the subtle nuances that astrology has that we don't really always get the opportunity to talk about. You know what I mean? Most of the time when we're doing, even astrologers, when we're talking about we're talking about astrology. We're not talking about the dynamics that kind of go around it. And anyway, thank you for that question. I thought that was a really good question. As much as I would love to talk about my personal placements and talk about me this whole thing, we're not going to do that today. But I did want to go over, again, having the awareness of, I talked about that in one of the previous episodes of just, having the awareness of certain negative things in your chart or certain negative transits that are going up. It can create a lot of this anxiety. Something that, the reason I'm kind of want to even do this episode too is a lot of feedback that I get with my clients is, and I don't know, I'm not sure if this is a compliment yet or not, but a lot of the reason people will come to me for readings is they're like, oh, you're going to, everyone thinks like, oh, I'm going to tell it to them straight. And, I'm going to keep it real with them, which I think that's a compliment. I do really try to be super authentic. And that's why I think a lot of people come to me, but sometimes I feel like people will kind of come to me for this sense of like they're looking for the negativity, or they're kind of like looking to confirm a lot of that stuff, which that's what astrology does. But I kind of wanted to talk about it because it's something that is kind of, the feedback I get from clients is clearly they're looking for someone that's not going to bullshit them and that's not going to soften the transit. And I think it says a lot about what, I guess, what kind of astrology is out there if this is why people are coming to me, because a lot of people also say like, oh, a lot of people, a lot of people seem to be like afraid of it not being like super real and authentic. But anyway, astrology is negative in its entirety, truly. When we start talking about, because how I want to build this up, how I want to talk about this, which by the way, let me just put a pin in that. I tried to record this episode a couple days ago and it did not work for me. So I'm on round 2 here. All right. I'm trying really hard. I really want to talk about a lot of these ideas. But it's kind of hard when you're sitting here by yourself recording everything and having to structure it. But anyway, astrology is super, super negative. That's something that you have to just know going into this. Now, we could argue here all day long about, oh, well, it's really about perspective and, well, not everything's negative. But when you look at the tradition, which regardless of your opinion of traditional astrology or modern astrology, astrology is going to outlive you. It's going to outlive me. It's been around for thousands and thousands of years. And when you go back to the thousands and thousands of years it's been around, it's pretty much negative. When you also look at life back then, it was mostly negative. I think to understand astrology, you really have to have a real good understanding of reality. And that is, shit's tough. Like, life is not easy. I think that's why most of us, I kind of make this comment a lot of like, there's not too many people that come into astrology for shits and gigs. A lot of people find themselves in this world because of certain life circumstances that make them kind of question everything. So, to kind of go back a little bit, astrology has this negative pretense already. And right now, well, I don't want to say right now. I'm currently recording this on the 4th of July. I'd be more excited about the 4th of July, but there's nothing to be excited about here in America in this day and age. But the negative transit that I was referring to is over, but we're having some pretty hardcore transits right now. Mars, opposite Saturn. Mars squaring Uranus. Saturn square Uranus. This has been really uprooting a lot of, more and more people I talk to. It's just so much craziness is happening to them all at once. And so I just think, right now, and when we talk about like the astrology of later on this year and just the future transits, it's just really easy to get scared. It's super easy to be like, this is terrifying. What's going to happen? Oh my God, I don't know. And so that's really one of the big things I really wanted to talk about that's why I wanted to do this episode. I wrote some show notes down here, and I'm like, this is almost going to be like a presentation, because usually I would kind of go off the cuff, but there's a lot of aspects of this conversation I want to make sure I hit on. I want to define a negative transit here for a moment, because again, and I've talked about this before, the subjectivity of the experience is number one. That's what matters the most. Again, when you're an astrologer, and like you guys get this, is like, you'll have someone come to you and you could sit here and say everything in the world is going to be going good for them and that's going to be great. And then you say one negative thing and they hyper focus on that and they think it's like going to be the end of the world. So when you define a negative transit, number one, you got to take the subjective bias off of it. Number two, anything can be interpreted as negative too. Like, a full moon can be looked at it as negative. A Venus, you could even look at a Venus-Jupiter conjunction as negative. Again, what the challenge with astrology is being able to recognize both the debilitating, the more not fun, the more harmful part of reality, and also be able to look at the opportunities of where it's at. So I think when you think of a negative transit, this is why I said in my last weekly about the Mars-Saturn opposition, I said for some people this is going to like really end it all. But for some people, this is really going to be that spark that does all the changes that they need, that inspires all the changes that they need to make. It's really important to understand, just because it's involving bad characters, Mars, Saturn, Pluto, whatever, that it's not always going to be bad. But you can always read it as bad. And that's to be really clear. And I think it's also a good thing to make the foundation of it as like negative, right? Because those are, on one sense you could say Mars, Saturn opposite each other, right? Tension, heaviness. An opposition is like literally like face on type stuff. So you can know that it's not going to be light or delicate. But it's super easy to think that everything is negative, everything's bad. And one of the other big points I really wanted to make, and this is something that I see more and more with people getting into astrology and not, how do I put this? Not having a healthy relationship to like, I don't know how else to put this, like life? Like, I know that sounds hard, but like the planets do not have it out for you. And I get a lot of people who it's almost as if they're walking into a session or they're walking into astrology looking to confirm where life has it out for them. And like, we could sit here and say, life doesn't have it out for you, everyone has it bad. But the reality is that is all your ego thinking that life is out to get you. That is you attaching your ego to everything, and you've got to detach that before you can even walk into this space, because it's not all about you. I'm sorry, it's really not. There are so many other lives going on, and there's so much, and you don't even know why you're here. Like, this is another reason why, like, I get this question a lot with readings. People want to know what their purpose is like, and I think I talked about this on a podcast episode, like, who am I to tell you what your purpose is? You don't even know what your purpose is. You can live your whole life and think and have a purpose. You could be someone like Stephen Hawking, who truly changed the way that we see the whole entire universe. And we can't even say that was his purpose, because we don't know what that is in the future. We don't know what that's going to mean in the future, right? We don't know what that's going to mean for someone else. To think that it's all about you, like, I hate being a Leo and saying this, like, it's truly not. The planets don't have it out for you. So take yourself out of the equation for a moment. Like, of course, this is life. Bad things are going to happen. That's reality. We're not in this, it's stressful to be an astrologer, because a lot of people come to astrology to try to, like, change the way that they're under. It's like, no, like, life is hard. We are all here because we are trying to understand it, and I would hope try to do something about it. I don't think everyone's on that same page though. But the planets don't have it out for you. That's just life. You're no better or no worse than any other person. And sometimes shit's gonna hit you, and sometimes it's not. We use astrology to figure out when it's going to happen. So that maybe it's not necessarily out for you, and that it's necessarily cycles. One way you could also confirm that it's not, that the universe isn't out for you, is having the self-awareness of realizing, where do you get yourself into these problems? The big thing with astrology, and this is something I know I'll have people disagree with me on, is that it screams from the mountaintops personal responsibility. What's nice about astrology is that we can confirm when outside things happen. It's not your fault. Sometimes life's just shitty, right? That's just how it is. That's what I love about astrology, is that not everything has a meaning or a purpose. Not everything is like, oh, you're going through this bad thing because so-and-so, and one day it'll all be better. Like, that's not how, like, sometimes shitty things just happen. And that's life. I think we try to romanticize and try to, and that's just human nature. But, sometimes shitty things just, kind of happen. And, while it's important to understand that can happen, you can't just, now that you know that, for you to sit there and be like, oh, well, Mars and Saturn's going opposite, I guess it's just going to happen to me. Oh, no. And it's just like, you can't just, that's literally like the trolley cart analogy, but you're just standing there rather than like deciding. You're just not deciding. Not making a decision is a decision, by the way. Not choosing a side is choosing a side, by the way. You're speaking from a Libra moon here. But, you know, there's a sense of personal responsibility that comes in where it's like, okay, you know, this is a shit situation. What can I do about it? What are my opportunities and what are my obstacles? That's what astrology provides, right? For example, like I have a Mars in Gemini, like I'm a day chart, it's in my 7th house. I'm really good at arguing with people. And I'm also really good at hurting people's feelings when I argue with them. So like one of my obstacles is like, how do I, you know, express my issues or maybe even express some of my anger without necessarily like, you know, bringing harm to other people. That's where the stuff, I could be like, oh, well, I have Mars in the 7th house, so everyone just fucks me over and, you know, everyone just gets mad at me. Or I can go, okay, clearly we can identify what the issue is and try our best to circumvent it. Now, there's another side of astrology that's very fatalistic, as if like, for example, my Mars and Gemini in the 7th house. I'm gonna have people fuck me over. In fact, Mars rules my 12th house of hidden enemies and is in my 7th house of open enemies. The natal promise states that people are gonna fuck me over. That's part of it. But what does that mean for me? That means a lot of different things. What does it mean to have that awareness around it? And it's like, you know, and to come back to this, you know, personal responsibility thing and things being negative, you got to understand how to read that. That is up to you. That is not anyone else's job to understand. You know, that's what's hard as an astrologer is like, you know, I could help you pinpoint it. You know, it's kind of like ad libs. I can really give you the word track, but you got to fill in the blanks. You got to be able to bring things in together for yourself, which I think astrology makes that easy to do. But you know, the planets don't have it out for you. They're simply letting you know what's up. In my opinion, they're letting you know what's to be expected. I wrote down I don't even want to say an analogy, but I wanted to create a visual. Now, I have a lot of different opinions about the mechanism of astrology and how it works, but one way I almost like to look at it is like the planets could almost just like play a charade for us. Like bad things happen, right? And it may not necessarily be the planets, but for example, Mars is opposite Saturn. Well, let's say Mars was square Saturn. We're going to have a really gnarly Mars-Saturn square at like the end of this year. I don't think you'll be able to see it from the sky, but you would be able to see a Mars-Saturn square from the night sky. You know, it's not necessarily Mars and Saturn are doing it, but they could be acting things out and almost playing charades in order for us to tell a story, for us to understand our experience better, right? They're just acting things out to kind of guide us. Something I really, really focus on in my practice is how much the stars are literally have always been a tool to guide us, whether that's through time, whether that's through, you know, geography, like through our actual world, whether that's through the oceans, whether that's through ourself, through astrology. It's really a guide. That's really what they are here. And you have to be able to understand what they're telling us. They can't, the way that they could, it's like charades. You know, we could all interpret hand motions completely differently, and we can be like, no, you're not picking up what I'm putting down. You know, I can't think of any type of motion to do at the moment. But again, you've played charades where it's like someone doing a motion, someone will interpret it one way versus someone else will interpret it a completely different way. And it's like, both of them could be wrong. And you just, you have to understand, the planets playing their charades, just because, you know, you're like, oh, that's bad. Oh, that's bad. It's like, well, no, like read it a little bit deeper. Think of it a little bit deeper. The planets don't have it out for you. They're just trying to tell you what is up. Life would be easier if it was all the planets, right? Life would be so much easier if it was all fate because you wouldn't have any control over it, right? But unfortunately, we do have some control over it. And I think that's what makes life really hard because it truly is up to us to navigate this shit. Because you know, really no one else is going to do it. No one's going to read the stars for us. You got to be able to interpret what that means for you in your life, right? Anyway, so one way I also feel about this too, that I don't necessarily know how again, and this is something I talk about in my website. I don't know if any of you have ever read my bio. Shout out to the ones that have, but I kind of make a point in, I'm still pretty young. I'm going to say that I'm young for like ever, but my opinions change. My beliefs change. My experience changes. It is open to that adaptation. That's part of life, who am I to be as young as I am, 24, not movable, not changeable. I'm not as changeable as maybe when I was like 18, right? I've got a lot more steadiness, but I feel like astrologers lean in between these two worlds, and I truly don't know what the right answer is here. No one knows what the right answer is here, and it is kind of an audible thing, but there are a lot of astrologers in certain spaces that really twist all of this stuff to be really positive, and that it can't just be a bad thing, and that there's nothing to gain. Like it really is the pseudo spiritual people that just create this fantasy around, I think, reality. Not everything's for your higher purpose. Not everything's karmic. And I don't even think, even if it is all karmic, even if it is all for your higher purpose, reading every situation like that is not helpful. And in fact, it's probably bad for you. Life is hard. We have a great tool called astrology to help us guide that. But I also think with astrology in the spiritual world, in the more broader context, the being upset, or I think even just raging, I really think I've talked about this before about like Mars energy is, I think in most cultures, just like repelled away. Like no one really likes that. It's too intense for a lot of people, especially the astrology community. There's this sense of like feeling like you have to contain that experience. And like something with this Mars-Uranus square and the Saturn-Uranus thing. I've been telling a lot of the fixed sign people this. Because as a fixed sign, you guys know the fixed sign, we love to keep it, we love to not change. We love the stability. The whole point of a fixed sign is to keep the continuation of something, right? But with that Uranus-Saturn square, like we've all been having this itch to just kind of, fuck it, I'm just gonna do this real quick. I'm just gonna do this suddenly. I'm just going to literally like lash out. Like I know lash out sounds like scary, but like you have to, like, for example, this Mars, Saturn, Uranus, it's like if you're going through it, I wouldn't tell you like, oh, Mars is opposite Saturn squaring Uranus. Find a safe place and, hold it all in. Like, this is like, you need somewhere to get that out. And in fact, let it out on someone. Fuck it. You know what I mean? You got to know what the repercussions of your actions. And so everything's up to you. You have, that kind of choice. But like, when you see things, like, it's okay to be angry and it's okay to be really yourself is what I'm trying to get here. Because there's certain things in people's charts that like aren't going to jive with like how things are being interpreted, right? Like how society or the world wants you to do things. Not everyone's chart, most people's charts aren't up to that, right? You got to be able to allow yourself that space to have your own experience. Like, not even just like with the negative stuff and the positive stuff. Like, experience it for yourself. Like this Mars-Saturn opposition that we just kind of got off of. You could look at astrology and be like, oh, they've all been saying it's going to be negative, and then some people are going to be positive. Well, it's like, how about what is this experience like for you? It doesn't have to positive twist. Something I really realized with this Mars-Saturn, personally for me, I was really scared of it. I have Uranus squaring my Mercury right now. I've got Saturn opposite my Mercury. I've got Mars on my Mercury. Mercury rules my 10th and my 7th house. I've been a little bit nervous of it. I'm not going to lie. What it really was so far that I know. This might change. I might get a text message or something, but what it's really been is literally like a delay. It's literally just been me like lagging. It's been me also trying too hard for something I really realized is like how much energy I was putting into, like, for example, this podcast. And it was just like, like I said, I did one before and I went off on some tangent and I couldn't pick myself back up, which that's real. I do this by myself. This is really hard to have all these like notes that I want to hit and go on the tangents that I do by myself and remember what I'm saying. It's a very challenging thing for my brain to do. And I kind of just like quit like suddenly. And I've never like stopped I haven't stopped in the middle of a recording like in a long time. So that was just kind of weird, but it wasn't necessarily bad. I'm glad I waited, but it wasn't necessarily good. There doesn't have to be a positive twist in it, but also you got to understand that like it's not always going to be negative. It could literally, and you know, maybe if I didn't have astrology, I would be much more upset about that. Now that I see it, I'm like, okay, well, that kind of leads me to my next point of the difference. Well, my next point that I want to write down, we're going to eventually get to how I use it, but the difference of knowing when and when not to act, I think is a really big deal when it comes to the rough transits. Because, like, for example, the Mars-Saturn opposition, maybe that would be a good time not to react. I know I just said, you know what, react, do it, fuck it. Sometimes you need to get that out of your system. But with this Mars, I would ask yourself, what would be the consequences of your actions? Like, we can use astrology to validate, and I have no problem with that. In fact, I think that is one of the most beneficial tools of astrology. But it's so hard to remain authentic when you have the foresight that you do, and to not, like, for like this Mars-Saturn opposition for me, it's like, how about instead of me tweeting something dumb, how about I just stop and shut up? Like, that was also a big thing for me with this Mars-Saturn opposition. You know, where can I have a healthy place for that? Because here's the hard side of astrology. It's going to happen. The rough transits, they're going to happen. Just like in life. You, even if you've gone through some of the worst things in your life, you're not done yet. I know that's shitty, but you have plenty of more horrible things to go through. That's not to say you're not going to have plenty of other amazing and spectacular life-changing events that happen to you, that blessings fall from the sky. That's going to happen too. But this negative stuff, it's going to happen no matter what. And with astrology, because we have the foresight we do, we allow ourselves the ability to at least put it in a container somewhere, right? Like, for example, this Mars-Saturn opposition squaring Uranus. If I really wanted that energy to play out of my life, I could have tweeted a bunch of shitty things. I could have just, went off on a bunch of things that I knew would have got people mad. I could have went and drove around really crazy. And it'd be like, it's literally like when you see a negative transit like that, why would you put yourself in harm's way, right? You go, oh, that's going to be negative. Maybe I should try, for example, the Mars-Saturn opposition. I tried to at least not be on the road, just because also, personally for me, this would have been like, Mercury has signified car wrecks for me before. For me personally, I was like, I'm not going to go on the road when it exact happens. Because I try not to be like, I'm not going to be like, oh, I'm not going to go on the road the whole week. Because that's just like paranoia, and that's not healthy. Again, with astrology, we have to develop a healthy relationship. It is so easy to have this tool enable all of the shit things that we tell ourselves, whether that's the bad things or that's the lies that we tell ourselves to say that we're great people. We cannot allow astrology to enable a false reality, right? Anyway, I tried to, it's like for me, I didn't want to be panicky and just not drive, but I'm like, I'm not going to go out and sometimes, okay, I'm going to confess a little sin here. This is my toxic trait. Sometimes I don't wear my seatbelt, but that's because I only really drive like a block within my house. But I was wearing my seatbelt the whole time. You know what I mean? I was like, you know what, Cameron? How about instead of being a dumbass and not wearing your seatbelt the day of the Mars-Saturn opposition and you driving around, that's the day you're totally going to get in a fucking car wreck with the day you don't have your seatbelt on, right? It's like, okay, let me at least do that. Let me at least do this. That's really all you can really do. Same thing with the Mars-Saturn opposition. If you know you want to get in a fight with someone and you know it's going to be bad, try avoiding it. There's a Mars-Saturn square at the end of this year. There's one in Scorpio that I've been trying to tell everyone. It's just like, it truly is a November 10th for anyone who's looking it up. Look up November 10th. It's a pretty gnarly day. It's just one of those days where it's like, it's going to happen somewhere, somehow. The least you can do is like, don't plan anything on that day. Don't, go for a drive or, don't plan anything. Like, don't be like, let me have my wedding day on this really hard day. It's like, okay, let's not have the most potentially like worst event happen on this day. Like, how can you give space for it, right? How can you try to control it as much as possible? And I also think too, with the Mars-Saturn stuff, with a lot of this stuff, and this is just me kind of speaking here. I don't know a lot of people that actually kind of talk about anger, frustration, and I don't know why. Especially Americans, we have so many. We have life very good, but we have so many things to truly be angry about. And I don't believe society offers genuinely any positive tools for people's anger. For me growing up, I had a lot of anger issues, and that's why I really went into the metal scene. I mean, from like, I was like 13 years old, no, like 12 years old till I left California when I was 17. Every weekend I was at some local show, getting in the mosh pit, relieving stress, relieving anger. It's really shunned in society nowadays to, be upset unless it's on, Twitter, and it's all about bashing other people and doing it for like clout and for social status, and doing it in these snarky attitude put down ways rather than like true anger and frustration and like what to do with it. Cause then like also people, don't want you, it's not always healthy to be like lashing out on people. It's super easy to just have it built up. And I'm bringing this up because this Mars-Saturn opposition with Uranus, like if you're an angry person, which I know I'm not the only one who's angry. I know plenty of you are very angry. In fact, most of you are actually completely pissed, but most of you are probably so checked out from it that you don't even realize that you're actually angry. Sorry if that offends anybody, but it's just anger really is a completely ignored emotion. And when you get things like Mars-Saturn, you get the frustrations, you get the fights, you get the things that blow up. What are you doing with it? If you've got this negative energy, what are you going with it? Like, that's why, for example, like exercise, like, God damn, is exercise like it should be the first tool you use for frustration, depression, anger, any mental illness. I swear to God, exercise is going to do more wonders for you than fucking anything else on this earth will. That's the one thing you should go. But if you're frustrated, if you've got these, hard things that you're dealing with in life, rather than having them, because here's the thing with Mars and Leo, Saturn and Aquarius, it's going to be easy to lash out on people. And truly in this day and age, we've got to be nicer to each other. Like the Saturn and Aquarius energy is getting really old in my opinion. And with Mars and Saturn, it's like, you have some personal responsibility. You have the ability to know when you're going to blow up. You have the ability to know when it's going to go down, how you're going to feel. It's same thing with those moon transits. The moon's in Scorpio, we're all a little agitated. Moon's in Aries, we're all a little, confrontive and combative. You just got to know. You just got to be self-aware, and you got to have that space. You can't deny that space for you. You've got to let that Mars energy flow. There's so many, I don't want to misinterpret things here, but it's really easy to do that. I saw some, a few, I forgot who it was, a couple of people on Twitter talking about not wanting to, I think, remediate Mars. And I thought that was kind of weird because it's just Mars, I feel like this is the first planet you want to remediate because Mars causes a lot of damage. And just letting that loose and not trying to control that would, in my opinion, cause some issues. But so how I kind of also wanted to really talk about everything was, so there's the anger stuff, there's the bad stuff, right? But then there's like what does it mean when something bad's going to happen? Like, how do you manage it? And like, I really wanted to share this story because in that tweet I read you guys, and that person's like, do you have any about your personal chance? It's a personal story. I do have a personal story. And I think a lot of people can relate to this. The best story I could share with, as far as when it comes to like knowing a bad transit's going to happen, like knowing it's going to happen, knowing even how it's going to affect you. How do you deal with that? On one hand, I truly have zero advice because it's sometimes you just got to sit there and watch. Sometimes it's just sometimes it is what it is. And astrology is helpful. That doesn't mean it is not serious. You know what I mean? Like when it's funny how casually we treat the ability to see the future. And there's a lot of things that you will see in the future that you go, maybe I didn't want to know that. And I think that's the hardest part about being an astrologer, is just being like, oh, wow, future kind of looks a little, scary. It kind of looks a little intimidating. But I remember when I first got into astrology about 2014. Well, I got into the occult stuff 2013. I got into astrology about 2014. And I just got my dad's chart, and I'd seen it for the first time. And he had let me just show you guys his chart so you guys could see what I saw. And if you've been practicing astrology before 2020, you're going to understand what I saw here. And for those who don't, let me explain a few things. Let me get it up. So this is my dad's chart. I guess I have his permission because he's dead. But anyway, look at this Capricorn stellium he's got. Now, if you were not into astrology before 2020, for those of you who don't know, before 2020 was all astrologers could talk about. We were like, oh my God, Saturn-Pluto conjunction in 2020. All the crazy things in 2020. It's going to happen. I mean, everyone's been playing this forever, right? And I knew about this getting into astrology back in 2014. And I saw all of these placements and the Saturn-Pluto like happening on a Saturn. I was like, and then also too, he's got like this like super gnarly Moon-Mars conjunction in his like 4th house. And I was like, that's not good. Like, that can't be fun. And I didn't, at first, when you get into astrology, there's a level of trust. It's kind of like a relationship. There's a level of trust that you initially have that you don't realize because that's just a part of the relationship. But then there's a time where something comes up that really puts that trust into question. And you really ask yourself if you trust it. And with my dad, with this, it was like, okay, I knew something bad was going to happen, but I had never seen anything yet. I was very early in my studies of like, oh, that nothing bad's going to happen. It can't be that crazy. I didn't know what it would look like. I knew like it was going to be a second Saturn return and be intense. And also for those who are just listening, Aries, right? He's an Aries rising. He's got Saturn, Jupiter, the Sun, and Mercury all in Capricorn in his 10th house. And he's got Mars retrograde in Cancer and the Moon in Cancer. Early January 61. Yeah, he wasn't making it out of that Saturn-Pluto thing. Not to say that, that's how everyone who was born around this time would get it, but this specific chart. Anyway, at that time I hadn't had that experience, but I still knew. And I think, what was hard was he passed away in 2019, and it was during the meat grinder for those of you that remember, the Mars Saturn opposition in Cancer was when he got he was diagnosed with stage 4 throat cancer, I think in November of 2018, right when the nodes moved into Cancer. And then that was when it went to his brain. So he got brain cancer during that time, during the Mars Saturn opposition. And so watching that happen real time as an astrologer, I'm not gonna lie to you. You think you know what you're going to do. Like, that's what's hard about being an astrologer, is like you see it far ahead, and you think because you see it farther ahead, you know how you're going to react, and you know what you're going to do different, and you think that you're going to have some type of control, and the reality is you don't. I was paralyzed with, I think, how real it all was. It was super. I think one of the scariest parts of astrology is how real it is. Like losing my dad, the COVID thing. Those were two parts of astrology that truly fucked me up. Like I was not okay after the COVID thing. Like, I don't know how astrologers also, I don't know how that has not completely messed up the mind of most like, I wasn't ready for that. I wasn't ready for the thing in the stars to say that the whole world was going to change, to completely change the whole fucking world. Like, I don't know. I still struggle with coming to grips with that. And I think even now, and something that I've really accepted, and this is, I think one of the hardest parts about being an astrologer is, like, you know, I could sit here and say, oh, in hindsight, I could have handled that differently. You know, maybe the next time when something crazy happens and I know it's going to happen, I'll be able to handle it differently. I don't know if I could do that. I don't know if that would be possible. I think having the awareness that it happens that's not like, sure, you might be aware that the moon is going to be in Scorpio for a few days, so you might be upset. But most of you have had these experiences. The experiences that truly define a lot of your life, and when you see that, you start to really go, okay, I think, like, for me with my dad, one of the hardest parts about losing my dad was at the time he was married to a woman who pretty much, I think they got married pretty much because they both didn't want to die alone. My dad was about to divorce her because she was pretty much getting in the middle between me, my dad, and my sister. And then right when he got brain cancer, she pretty much stayed there the whole way. And she really made seeing my dad very hard. Like, my last conversation with my dad was pretty much with her in the other room giving me, like, a time limit to talk to my dad. It was, and you know, that was one situation. But why I'm kind of bringing that up is I didn't have all of the time that I wanted to. Like, it was so weird in that moment. Same thing with COVID. It's like, oh, the Saturn Pluto conjunction. I'm gonna change my, like, or the Saturn Jupiter conjunction. Oh, I'm gonna wait for that to change my life. That's gonna be the thing. Same thing with, you know, with my dad. Oh, you know, I think he's gonna die around here, so let me try to take as much time as I can with him. It's like, those things don't end up happening. You can be aware that it's happening, and with that awareness, you have a small amount of control in which you can do something with. And the reality is, like, that's just how it's gonna be. Again, what I noticed with my dad passing, like, dude, that was just a shitty fucking thing. Like, no one won. No one won with that. No one, you know, me and my sister suffered. My dad suffered. You know, Kathy, even though, you know, fuck my dad's wife, she suffered too. She had to go through a lot. Because me and my sister are not fun people to deal with when you mess with our family. But you think that you're gonna, that you know, but you don't. So when I give the advice of how do you deal with a hard transit, how do you deal with that? knowing that it's going to happen, it's just like accept it. It's you're going to die one day. You are going to die one day. And a lot of people think that they know that, but they haven't actually come to grips with that. And I think when you also look at your relationships, like they're not going to be there one day. When you look at your job, that you're not going to be doing that one day. When you look at your present moment, you realize it's not going to be there that one day. You can appreciate it more. And when I talk about dealing with the bad transit, that's really all you can do. Like, you know that bad things are going to happen to you in your life. I know that I'm going to lose, like my mom and my sister are the closest relationships I have. And I know one day they're both going to die. Just like I know one day there's going to be, I've looked through every single fucking day of the rest of my life in the astrology. I've got some horrible days coming up. I know that those are going to happen too. And what I truly do, and this is why I hound on this on my Twitter, is being fucking grateful for what you have right now. Being grateful for when it is good, because those bad moments, they're just like the good moments. They are super temporary. They are just a day. They are just a moment. Everything, I hate to say it, but time is the ultimate healer of wounds. I know I'm young, but like there's certain shit only time can really heal. And I just think really the only benefit that, I don't want to say the only benefit, the main benefit is just knowing that it's going to happen. Because for me, and this is how I want to close this out. This is how I use astrology. Like, genuinely, this isn't not based off of a book or based off what someone else said. This is how I use it. I would rather know when something bad is going to happen. Even if I can't control it or fix it or change it, I would rather know. Losing my dad and COVID. If I had not had astrology, I probably would have killed myself by now. I'm being 100% honest. I probably would have been gone by now. For how I would have been, my ego would have been completely attached to those situations, and I would have been like, the world is out to get me. Like, clearly, I've had a lot of good things in life, but I've also, me and my family have suffered a lot in the past few years. And I think with the cherry on top of my dad, it was kind of like, if I hadn't had that, no type of explanation, I mean, that would have been really hard. That would have been, I still don't know how I would have made it. I would have just been like every other guy and probably just stuffed all the trauma away for it to just come out when I'm, 50, 60 years old and throw away my whole life and just become miserable like everyone else. You know what I mean? And so, I mean, thank God I had astrology where I just knew that it was just that moment. It was just that moment, and that it was a part of the fucking plan. I hate to pull up my Judeo-Christian roots here, but God has a plan, and I've never actually said that on I'm not religious. You guys know me. I think most churches and all of that is honestly a poison to society in a lot of ways. But when you talk about astrology, if you don't think you have a fate, if you think that you don't have a destiny, yes, the whole world isn't about you, but you still have a life. You still have a purpose. We don't know what that purpose is. And it's not even your job to know what that purpose is, but you still got one. Sometimes you have the power to change direction. Sometimes you have the power, and I think that's the awareness. I think with my dad, this is where what really helped me with my dad. I think this is where astrology, I knew my dad was going to die. I knew it. When I got the phone call, he said he got stage 4 throat cancer. I knew it at that moment. I was like, he's gone. And, again, that's life. And I had to tell that to my sister, because my sister, love her to death. Me and my sister are real fucking tight. We're best friends. And I had to kind of tell her, I'm like, he ain't getting out of this. I've looked at his chart, this is going to be fucking rough. And she was in denial of it a lot, which I don't blame her. I was in denial of it. But I'm glad that I didn't lie to myself. Because if I went through, and I know a lot of you out there, because cancer and diabetes, there are plenty of other health crises in the world that are actually affecting more people besides just COVID. But because probably most of you in my audience have lost a close family member or loved one to cancer, you probably understand how fucking hard it is to watch that. Like, that is, I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy, but I am so glad I didn't lie to myself thinking that my dad was going to make it out of that, because that would have been hard. That would have been thinking that, and I don't want to put any bad energy, because I know, and this is the thing. My dad's fight with everyone's fight with cancer is completely different. So I don't even want to talk about the cancer stuff, but just like, I knew based off what I knew about the situation, the astrology, and my dad, that he wasn't going to make it out. Not to say that, the astrology is going to confirm, like, if you have cancer that you're going to die of cancer. That's not always the case. I have friends that have also beat cancer multiple fucking times. And, that's where you get into the whole, like, and a lot of people don't want to talk about this, that, the mind-body connection is really, crazy. And I know a lot of people that have literally worked themselves out of cancer. And then, like my dad, who pretty much gave up when he got the diagnosis. And, lo and behold, he didn't make it through. But anyway, I'm glad I didn't lie to myself thinking that it was going to be, I'm glad I didn't ignore the astrology either. I'm glad I didn't go, astrology's bullshit. He's going to be fine. We're going to get through this. I'm glad I had the time to digest that. And so to kind of wrap up this episode of what I've been trying to talk about here, of how do you foresee a bad thing? You know that it's going to happen. Well, guess what? That's life. You can sit here and worry and prepare and do this and do that. And there are benefits to that. For example, like, I don't worry about dying, but I have a life insurance policy, because the last thing I want to be is a financial burden when I die. But I don't worry about dying. I'm going to die one day. I don't give a shit what happens after I die. It's everyone else's problem, right? But there's certain aspects about life that, and this is, astrology is not telling a fairy tale. It's telling your life. And this isn't about, it's just about time. It's just about timing. Like, I truly think one of astrology's main tools in the future is truly just going to be a hyper personalized calendar. When are your good days? When are your bad days? And, when it comes to what to do, I don't know what to do. I think everything's audible. I look at this Mars-Saturn opposition. The one thing I will say that I have not mentioned at all during this, which I think is really important, Time Lords. Not every bad transit affects you the same. That is super duper 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 important. Just because there is a Mars-Saturn opposition, if Mars and Saturn aren't activated in your chart, that Mars-Saturn, like for me, Mars and Saturn are not activated in my chart. They really didn't do much for me. Jupiter's my Time Lord, thank God. If Mars and Saturn were my Time Lord right now, that would be awful. So number one, I should have opened up with this, but the bad transits, it really does matter if it's activated. But then when you get into it, this is where it gets even crazier. When you go into like, okay, your ZR, your Time Lord, your Fedaria, your, the primary directions, when you go into all of that stuff, right? And then you see the bad transits of when it's going to affect you, then there's kind of like a little bit of a gulp. That's life. I think a lot of astrology is surrendering. Truly. There's surrendering to what you know is going to happen. Like with my dad, for example, I had to surrender that I knew that fool was going to pass away. I thought because I knew that and I accepted it, that I would be able to like know exactly what to say before he died. And I didn't. Like I was fucking 22, 23 when my dad died. So I didn't know what was right, what was wrong back then. But, sometimes you have the power, sometimes you don't. Life is going to happen and you really got to call it for what it is in that moment. Astrology is going to tell you exactly what that moment's going to look like and what exactly it's surrounding yourself with. But it is up to you and your personal experiences and knowledge and personality to make the decisions that you kind of make. When you look at a bad transit, I don't think there's anything that you should fear. I think you should surrender to it. I think if you resist it, it's only going to hurt more. And that's not to say that, and again, astrology is fucking validating. That Mars-Saturn shit, losing my dad I wouldn't wish what me and my sister had to go through on anybody. We didn't have anybody. Everyone else in my family's dead. It was just me and my sister having to navigate all of that. I wouldn't wish that on anybody. But I would also say that, it was it was hard, and it told the exact story. The astrology told the exact story of what I was going through and what I did go through. And it was real and it was raw as fuck. And so I think the way that I look at it now is I also look at that as like, not only was that a shit situation, but I learned a lot out of that. I've helped a lot of clients go through hard things because of the hardship that I go through. That I'm very grateful that I have that experience to be able to share with other people. I hope sharing my story has helped a lot of you go through stuff, right? So maybe there is a good side of it. I truly think there's a good side to everything, and I think that's where the power comes from. When you can go, okay, I say this to my older clients. When you've got your chart activated multiple times, you've gone through this, you've lived your life a little bit, you know what your problems are. Are you going to keep repeating the same lessons and not learning from them and not maybe changing your behaviors or actions? Or are you going to just keep doing the same thing hoping that it changes? I think astrology's bad transits are there for you to learn, because you're going to go through them again. You're going to have that again. And you've got to accept that. I don't think that's easy. I don't think, and everything that I'm saying right now, like everything that I'm talking about right now, everything that we talk about in astrology is not easy. It's absolutely frustrating how much people think like astrologers are supposed to give advice that like everyone can follow. It's like, when you talk about the reality of what astrologers do, we're literally talking about the movement of the planets that affect people's lives. And for some people that sounds like cuckoo, like we're crazy. But when you get into like what that looks like, is like most astrologers would agree. Like most of my clients, like we're talking about some deep fucking shit. I'm not talking about nothing easy. You know what I mean? So like this is really real. This is your life that we're kind of talking about. I think it's just when you learn, and there's not always a lesson to learn, but there is something to learn. I don't like to say like, oh, there's a moral of the story, but there is something to learn. Sometimes, you know what I learned with my 12th house here is you truly can't trust people. And that's not a good lesson to learn. But I did fucking learn it because I'm a very trusting person. And I learned that, no, you can't. And sometimes you do have to be a little bit cold. Sometimes, that lesson that you learn, that's you. That's what you make of that story, right? It's your experience. I think when you look at the bad transits though, rather than getting fixated on, like, for example, like this winter is going to be really shitty. It's going to be a really hard winter. And you can look at that and go, I mean, there's so many things that you could freak out about. Or you can just, I guess, this is why I also use like in my current conditions readings. Like I don't end my readings on the bad day. I'm like, yep, blah, 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 blah. And this is all bad. And then see you later. Like there's bad days and there's good days. If you're going to go out of your way to be scared of the bad days in astrology, then you're not only a fool, but you're a hypocrite for not going out of your way to find the good days and to celebrate them. I've talked about this, July 12th, that Mars-Venus conjunction with the moon. Like, I'm not even kidding. Go have fun that day. I don't care what your story is of what you're like. Go fucking have fun. Go do something. Enjoy yourself. Don't deny that. This winter is going to suck, but guess what? April of 2022 is probably one of the best months that we're going to have for quite a while, for the next few years. And it is straight up a whole calendar month of insane, crazy goodness. So you could sit here and go, okay, I know what that bad is going to look like. I know that that's going to be a hard time, but I've got to get through that hard time because I know there's going to be a good time on the other side of it. And you got to also know, if you're going to go through a hard time, why would you go through that hard time and not learn anything out of it? Like, yes, astrology can validate an experience, but why would you want to go through that and not at least learn something to where maybe if you have to go through it again, you can maybe do something a little bit different? Like, for example, like with my dad dying, that was really, it wasn't my first death. I've had a lot of people die, but that was like the first death that I, again, Kathy, this woman, who my dad was married to, she wasn't like helpful with the funeral stuff. Like, she wasn't even there. So me and my sister had to deal with everything from planning the funeral, getting him, cremated, to just the whole 9 yards. We didn't have any help with that. And now that I've gone through that, and I have so much more empathy and understanding for what people who, my dad was a firefighter, so thank God he had a lot of, things under control. But like I had a cousin. My cousin lost his father too last year, in 2019 as well. And just some of the shit people have to go through during funerals is super fucked up. It is truly, truly fucked up and awful what people, especially with COVID, what people have had to go through just to bury their loved ones. Truly like traumatizing. I lost a cousin during COVID from an accident, and no one was able to stay any time with him in the hospital. What you can learn out of that, what you can learn, especially like with me and my dad thing, is I learned to be a lot more empathetic of what people go through when, they say that they're struggling with cancer, or when they lost a loved one, or, when a parent dies, or, what else I learned? I learned how the death thing works. So, when my mom passes away, I'm not just blind to every problem that's going to happen. I know how to do it the next time. And maybe, there's a lesson to learn, pay attention. You don't know where that lesson's going to come up. It's not your job to know. Like, for example, like the whole death thing, I've had clients where I've shared the story, and it's like they relate to me more, and they appreciate that because they are going through a similar thing, and they want someone that understands. And like, I didn't know that maybe, losing my dad, I didn't know I could be able to connect with my clients on this different level, So it's just, I'm so fucking sick. Like, I literally could rage out about how binary people look at astrology. If it's either good or it's either bad. Like, literally, that is poison. That is stop looking at it like that. Stop looking at life and astrology as good or bad. It ain't that simple. It ain't. And truly, if you're going to do it that way, if you're going to nerf astrology as to good or bad, like, you're ruining it. It's because life's not good or bad. There's where COVID, the economy collapsed. Like in LA when I was living, half of all Angelinos were unemployed. That was bad. But guess what? If you were a billionaire, it was one of the greatest years in existence for you. So this, I'm not saying that, good or bad, there's two sides to it, right? Someone's going to benefit where there's a bad, someone's going to, lose where there's a benefit. I just don't think that, and that's not how astrology is either. I just wanted to use that kind of analogy of, that shit ain't just good or bad. It truly is what you do with it. And I think that also coincides with this idea of purpose. Like, what's the meaning of a certain transit? Like, stop going to astrologers, stop going to psychics, stop going to people to find out what the meaning is. You figure out what the meaning is for yourself. Like, seriously, because no one's going to tell it for you. And if you're going to rely on what other people's meaning is, like, fucking, it's not even your life. It's not even your life at that point. As an astrologer, you know what I can do? I can read your chart, and I can help you make sense of your world without you having to tell me anything. All I can do is read what the planets have to say, and then you make sense of that for yourself, and then you go on your merry way, and then you change whatever you change based off that information, right? But you got to stop going to astrologers and psychics for looking for the meaning, for the purpose of shit. It ain't there. You got to find it, because guess what? Life is literally, people are going to argue with me on this, life is meaningless. Life, and truly, in this day and age where you can live a truly meaningless life. Not to say that, we're all going to live, but like, it is really easy to live a meaningless life, and it is very easy to live a meaningful life. The only difference between the two is the person who lives a meaningful life decides that they do that. You know what I mean? So I think finding purpose, finding meaning in the transits, that is your job. I'm giving that job to you. Not stop coming to astrologers for that. All we can do is truly validate the experiences you're going through and help you understand that experience by showing you how you've gone through this in the past and how it's going to come up again in the future for next time. So I guess with this, how do you deal with bad transits? How do you deal with, negative things in your chart? I guess just like all of our other ancestors have, you just fucking deal with it. And you learn along the way. You don't be afraid to change. You don't be afraid to learn. You be open to that stuff. And truly, it's about surrendering and accepting. I think I truly lost my mind during COVID about I wasn't ready for it to just be that real. I'm sorry. And it took a long time for me to just really accept shit's just gonna be crazy. And you just gotta deal with it, really. Like I said earlier in this podcast, if you have, let's say the Mars set, for me, for example, I'm not going to go out of my way and do something crazy and dumb during a crazy bad transit, right? Try to negate it. Try your best. You know what I mean? I'm not going to go drive around without a seatbelt on the freeway, texting and driving during that. I'll try to be a little bit safer. But that's really all you can do. That's really all you can do. But the good news is it's a part of the plan. And now people are going to say, I don't know I don't know what the plan is. I don't know what the plan is. I don't know why it's a part of the plan in the future. All I know is that it's a part of it. It's a part of your story. I don't know what we're doing. Astrology is really much more complicated than I think people give it credit for. When you talk about okay, how do you handle a bad transit? That's kind of a tough question to answer. So I know some of you maybe thought I was actually going to give you some advice. I truly don't have advice. That's what I want to say. I don't know if there's people that are going to say, oh, do remediation. Work with the planet more. Yes, I agree with all that, but truly it's surrendering and accepting and that awareness. Being aware that it's happening. And in that moment, that can lead you to make different decisions. There were certain things with my dad. I didn't get to ask him every question I wanted to, but there were a few questions that I'm fucking really glad that I did ask, because and there was things that I prepared for, like my dad dying. I knew he was going to die, so I prepared for that, and I'm so glad I did. That's what got me out of that situation, because if I thought that my dad was going to make it out of that and everything's going to be fine, I wouldn't have been able to do the things that I had to do in the way that I had to do them. So, literally just accept it, I guess. I know this isn't the most inspirational podcast. I would just say, though, really be grateful for the good things that do happen. And when those bad things happen, pay attention, because if you check yourself out of the bad, you're not going to be aware of when it's good, because you'll have nothing to compare it to. So when there is a bad transit too, feel the negative, the negative energy. That's why I said earlier, let it lash out, get it out of your system. Don't hold it in, because then you won't appreciate when things are good. And I know that's just weird, but that's just, you guys are on, I'm just telling you my opinion. I don't have the right answers. No astrologer has the right answers. No one, not even the therapists, psychologists, none of them have the right answers. No one does. No one has this shit figured out. We are all literally just trying our best here. So anyway, I know that wasn't a lot of inspiration, but I think I hope I gave you guys enough to really chew on. And maybe when there's another bad transit, maybe when there's something else you can, I don't want to say accept it, but just get over it. But also just, I hate to say it, but just get over it. Like literally life moves on. Time heals all wounds. We should know that as astrologers, the bad times, are there. Prep for the bad times. Maybe if you're going to have some hard transits in your second house of money, maybe don't spend all your money. If you're going to have hard times in your seventh house, maybe work on communication skills so you can communicate better with your relationships. If you're going to have bad transits in your 10th house, maybe start looking for another job. You know what I mean? Start exploring your options a little bit more. Just have some awareness. Whatever's going to happen is going to happen. Sometimes it's just a bad thing, but it's up to you to really get something out of it. Life's going to hand you lemons. You can make lemonade with it, or you can, I don't know, do something else with it. But that's what I got for you guys. Yeah. Thank you for listening to this. I'm very grateful I have the ability to share these type of stories and this type of experience on here. I think that was all the things I really wanted to hit on. Once again, if you want to support more further production of the podcast, subscribe to my Patreon, become a patron, become a producer. Like I said, I got some more stuff coming on the way for the $10 patrons, as well as I'm going to be starting to have some more guests on here coming up here shortly. So anyway, with that being said, I love and appreciate every single one of you guys, and I will be seeing you next time.